This game of Commander brought to you by Propaganda. It worked for the Nazis. Welcome to part 2 of our spotlight, featuring a budget list of Marchesa the Black Rose. Josh goes first this game and keeps an opening hand of Animate Dead, Phyrexian Arena, Propaganda, Watery Grave, Swamp, Steam Vents, Crumbling Necropolis. Nancy's hand, Forest, Boreal Druid, Acidic Slime, Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger, Avenger of Zendikar, Regal Force. I keep a hand of Arcbound Slith, Bloodthorn Vampire, Molten Primordial, Swiftwater Cliffs, Opal Palace, Vivid Marsh, Swamp. Josh starts the game by playing Crumbling Necropolis. Nancy plays Forest and casts Boreal Druid. I cast Swiftwater Cliffs, gaining an entire life. Watery Grave tapped from Josh. Nancy again plays a turn 2 Azusa, but this time only plays one additional forest. I cast a turn 2 Arcbound Slith. Josh Vampiric Tutors for Soul Ring at the end of my turn, paying 2 life. Josh casts Soul Ring on his turn and Phyrexian Arena. Nancy plays her 4th land on her turn and casts Acidic Slime, blowing up Josh's Soul Ring. Nancy then attacks me for 1 with Azusa. I attack Josh for 1 with my Slith, and then counter the artifact creature since I dealt damage. I cast Bloodthorn Vampire and play Vivid Marsh. Josh loses 1 during his upkeep and draws an additional card from the arena. Josh casts Propaganda, which is going to make it very hard for me to attack him this game. Nancy casts Oracle of Modiah on her turn, which is going to work wonders for her this game. She reveals Harmonize off the top of her library. Nancy then attacks me for 4 with her creatures. On my turn, I cast Marchesa the Black Rose and attack Nancy with both of my creatures, since not only is she on the throne, but I can't attack Josh anyway. I add counters to my guys and deal Nancy 5 damage. Josh loses life to Arena on his upkeep. Casts Preordain, Faithless Looting, and Ponder. Card Fixing Town Population Josh. Josh then casts Liliana's Caress, so Nancy and I especially don't want to discard now. Nancy plays 1 forest, casts Harmonize, and draws 3 cards. Not being able to attack easily into either one of us, Nancy just passes the turn. On my turn, I have the most life, so I won't get any attacking bonuses this turn. Again, needing the mana, I choose to attack Nancy instead of Josh because of Propaganda. I attack Nancy with Arcbound Slith. She blocks with her Ooze, killing both creatures. I trigger Marchesa, cast Hound of Grizzlebrand, and return the Slith at my end step. Again, Josh loses a life on his turn and casts Nekusar. On her turn, Nancy draws 2, loses 2, plays a land off the top of her library, casts Avenger of Zendikar for 7 plants, and then plays 3 more forests off the top of her library. Nancy casts Solemn Simulacrum, adding another forest to the battlefield and counters to her plants. I draw 2 and lose 2 on my turn. I cast Sadistic Hypnotist. I then sack Arcbound Slith to the Hypnotist, targeting Nancy, who discards 2 cards. I trigger Marchesa off the Slith. I sack Hound of Russellbrand to the Hypnotist, again targeting Nancy. I trigger Undying from the Hound, who returns with a +1 counter. I then sack the Hound again to get rid of the last 2 cards in Nancy's hand, and trigger Marchesa for the Hound. Nancy discards both Vorinclex and Regal Force, and with her current board state, playing those 2 cards next turn would probably have secured her victory. Probably on that turn even. Oh, and Nancy loses 12 life from Josh's Liliana's Caress. I then sack my Bloodthorn Vampire to the Hypnotist to make Josh discard 2 cards. At my end step, I return 3 creatures back to the battlefield with Marchesa's ability. Josh draws 3 cards and loses 1 life. Josh casts Copy Artifact, copying Nancy's Solemn Simulacrum. Josh casts Animate Dead, stealing Nancy's Vorinclex from her graveyard. Just can't keep copying off of Nancy, huh? Josh then casts Notion Thief during Nancy's upkeep. Nancy only draws 1 card and loses 1 life, and Josh draws a card. Nancy plays her only card, Dungrove Elder, who is a 10/10. Seeing Josh as the emerging threat with Vorinclex, Nancy wants to attack him with her plants, but again, the Propaganda is causing her troubles. Any mana she pays into the Propaganda won't untap next turn due to Vorinclex. Quite the pillow fort Josh is establishing. After minutes of soul searching, Nancy decides to attack Josh with 4 of her plants and me with nothing. Nancy taps 8 mana, and Josh blocks a plant with Vorinclex and another plant with Solemn Simulacrum. One of Nancy's plant dies, Josh's robot dies, and Josh draws a card and takes 8 damage. Nancy passes the turn. I draw 1 and lose 1, and Josh draws for my second draw. I begin my turn sitting on the throne and very few counters on my creatures. I face an even more serious dilemma with Josh's Propaganda Vorinclex combo. I think for a while and decide to just go balls to the wall. I cast Treasonous Ogre, paying 21 life into the Ogre for 7 red mana, which also takes me off the throne. I use the 7 mana to cast Molten Primordial, stealing Vorinclex from Josh and Avenger of Zendikar from Nancy, although they were both really Nancy's to begin with. I then go to my attack step. With Vorinclex, I'm able to pay 4 mana into Propaganda and attack Josh with 2 creatures. I decide to attack him with Vorinclex and Bloodthroned Vampire, thinking they have the potential to deal the most damage and possibly take him out of the game this turn. After attacking, I realized that it would have been smarter to attack with both Vorinclex and Avenger of Zendikar, since they both would have gotten +1 counters since Josh is the king right now. I then could have sacked them both with my Bloodthorn Vampire, triggered Marchesa, and then had them both come into play under my control of my instep, making a heap of plant tokens from the Avenger and fodder for my Vampire next turn. Lesson learned. Josh doesn't block, and I realized that I would have to sack all of my other creatures to my Vampire in order to kill him this turn. Not wanting to do that and lose to Nancy next turn, I only sack Hound of Grizzlebrand twice to the Vampire and the Arcbound Slith, triggering Marchesa both times. Nancy blocks Avenger with her Simulacrum. Josh goes to 11 and draws a card from Nancy's Simulacrum dying. Post-combat, I pay 3 life to cast Arcbound Worker and sack Avenger of Zendikar to Sadistic Hypnotist to make Josh discard 2 cards, and so that Nancy doesn't get it back. I make Josh discard 2 more cards with Arcbound Worker and Vorinclex, discarding the rest of Josh's hand. At my instep, I return a bunch of creatures to the battlefield. Wow, that was quite the turn. Josh loses a life and draws 3 cards. He casts Coalition Relic and passes. Not wanting to attack into my board state, but not being able to pay too much mana into Propaganda, Nancy eventually decides to just attack Josh with Dungrove Elder, paying her last 2 available mana. Not wanting to die, Josh blocks with Notion Thief. Nancy passes her turn. Before the instep, I sack Arcbound Worker to Bloodthorn Vampire and trigger Marchesa, and modular the counters onto Arcbound Slith. I then return the Worker to play. Sack outlets are useful. On my turn, I lose 2 life and go to 7. I also untap only 2 lands. Luckily, one of the cards I draw is Nevermaker, which I evoke, finally getting rid of the Propaganda. I then go to my attack phase, attacking Josh with enough creatures to kill him, and Nancy with the rest of my creatures. Since Nancy has the most life, my guys attacking her get +1, and I don't have to worry about them dying since they're just going to come back with Marchesa's ability anyway. Marchesa is kinda good. Josh dies and Nancy blocks my 6 guys with her 6 plant tokens. I sack my Worker to my Vampire and modular my Slith. I kill 2 of Nancy's plants with my Vampire and Slith, and my other 3 guys die, which I let go to the graveyard. They come back at the instep. Thinking I'm in a good spot, I pass the turn. Nancy casts a Wormcoil Engine on her turn and goes straight to combat. She attacks with every single one of her creatures. It is at this point I do math and realize that I need 1 more point of life. If I block Nancy's biggest creatures, I will still take 7 damage and lose. After a few minutes of staring at my cards, I realize I can sack Hound of Grizzlebrand to my Vampire, trigger Undying, and have it return to the battlefield untapped. I then have enough creatures to block the onslaught fairly comfortably and survive. I also sack my Slith to my Worker to get counters from Modular. I take 4 damage from an unblocked plant and 1 damage from Azusa. I return 2 creatures with Marchesa at my instep. On my turn, I cast Stalking Vengeance and attack with everything. I trigger Dethroned for all my creatures once again. Nancy blocks Vorinclex with her Wormcoil Engine, but I sack the Praetor to Bloodthorn Vampire so Nancy won't gain the life. Nancy takes 8 damage from the Stalking Vengeance trigger when the Vorinclex dies. She then takes 38 damage from unblocked creatures, winning the game for Marchesa. Now that was a game. Once again, Nancy was quick out the gate with Ramp and a bunch of big creatures from Avenger. While I couldn't mitigate her board state, I did prevent her from following up that play by discarding her hand with the Sadistic Hypnotist. Marchesa, the creature, went unchecked that game. No one had any spot removal for her, or even board wipes. This means that creatures generally only left the battlefield as a result of combat. Bloodthorn Vampire was nothing short of phenomenal, allowing me to trigger Marchesa abilities at my own convenience and making the vampire formidable in combat. Another standout card was Treasonous Ogre, not only giving me mana, but also allowing me to get off the throne. Josh again said his deck was very low impact. Casting Animate Dead on Vorinclex was one of his most relevant plays that game. Propaganda was arguably the best card of the game as it saved Josh probably over 30 points of damage. Any threaten effect is always good with the sack outlet, even more so with Marchesa because I end up just stealing the card and keeping it. That's it for now. Thanks to Budget MTG Decks for the Marchesa list, and here we go again on our clone. Still looking for that sign-off phrase.